What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Scales 13. In today's video, I'm finally going to show off Thunder's brand new 6-foot PVC enclosure. Alright guys, so to start off with, let's talk about the make of this enclosure. So this enclosure comes from a company called Blackbox. It's based in Georgia. Now the cool thing about Blackbox is they have a wide variety of different sizes for PVC enclosures. Some companies stop at the 4x2x2, but these guys go all the way up to, I believe, an 8-footer, which is awesome. And the cool thing about them is you can make a lot of custom modifications to your enclosures as far as having light fixtures installed, different hides and shelves in the enclosures. Another cool thing is you can buy different varieties of the same size where some of them will have a raised edge like this one where you can actually hold more substrate within the enclosure. So if you have an animal that requires a lot of substrate and likes to dig like an Ackie Monitor, you can have that option of packing in more substrate for the animal's benefit. Another cool thing about these enclosures is they come in with a nice locking mechanism that's built into the top portion of where the doors are on the enclosure. These enclosures have hinge doors, and the cool thing I like about hinge doors is you don't have to worry about that scraping sound like a sliding glass door that you would have in some of the other enclosures that are available on the market. Now, don't get me wrong, sliding glass does make it easier where you don't have to worry about the door hitting anything when you open it, but as long as you have a clear space, I actually like hinge doors better. So let's talk about a few things that I did to the enclosure to make sure that Thunder was comfortable and that he was able to get enough exercise, have plenty of deep substrate for humidity and digging, and just make sure that he had a very comfortable home for himself, right? So, one thing that I did was I added a reach stack on the hot end of the enclosure. Now the reason I did that is because, of course, in the wild when you see an Ackie basking, or any lizard for that matter, on a rock outcrop, of course you're going to see cracks and crevices in those rock outcrops. If a biologist was going to go out there with a heat gun and they were going to check all the different temperatures around that rock outcrop, there's going to be a lot of different fluctuation between the different levels of heat between where the sun is actually hitting the stone and the lower points and the deeper points within a rock outcrop, right? So we want to mimic that in captivity to make sure the animal also has the different options of choosing different spots that have different temperatures for the animal to hang out at and keep its body warm, right? It allows Thunder to not only bask at the top of the stack, but every layer that you see in the stack has a different temperature. And of course the bottom portion, I have some dirt in the bottom, so if he just wants to dig out the bottom portion and just stay in a nice warm spot on the warm side of the enclosure, he can do that without needing to have any direct exposure to the basking lights. Another thing I did was I used 2 pavers to block off 4 feet of the enclosure so that way I can put a deep layer of sand and soil so that way the animal would have plenty of areas to dig and make his burrows. Now the reason I did that is because I wanted to make sure I had a retaining wall where the dirt was deep enough for the animal to completely bury its body. I have about a foot of substrate in here, but I wanted to make sure that his basking spot also had that depth so that way I can add the reach stack and be able to provide those cooler levels to the reach stack so that way Thunder had multiple options on the warm side to keep his body warm. There's a secondary basking spot right past the pavers, and what I like about this secondary basking spot is I can use a lower wattage bulb there where he can warm his body comfortably, but he still has the other option over here as well. Another thing that I added to this enclosure to give Thunder more areas to exercise is I actually added a 3D background to 3 sides of the enclosure. Now, if you look at my 3D background, you might notice that I don't have the 3D background going all the way down to the layer of the dirt. So some people would look at that and say, Scales, why'd you do it that way? Why didn't you just use spray foam and go all the way to the bottom? Well, it's kind of, how can I put it? It's kind of like knowing your animal, right? So with Thunder, I know if there's something in his way, he's gonna destroy it to get it out of his way, right? And the thing is, he likes to dig along the edges of his enclosure. He always has ever since he was a little hatchling when I first got him. And one thing I was thinking about was, I don't wanna put foam down all the way around where I know Thunder's literally just gonna keep digging at that and digging at it until he destroys the foam inserts that are all the way down at the bottom. It also gives him a chance to dig it down into those layers without any obstructions in his way. So I decided to just leave the upper layer for now. In the future, I may use a harder material for the 3D background where he'll be able to climb and everything else, but it'll be more durable. I might put up better with his digging and his scratching. But that's something that I'm not planning on doing anytime in the near future, but it is an option. And last but not least, of course, I added a bunch of wood and cork bark to the cool side of the enclosure, so that way Thunder would have plenty of areas to hide and climb and do all the things that Ackies do in the wild, so that way he would feel comfortable within this big space. It's good to give an animal a large enclosure, but at the same time, animals want to feel safe and secure. They want to have an area to retreat to in case a predator comes into their territory. Now, even though Thunder is in an enclosure and he is in captivity, if I was to open the door quickly to the reptile room, or if anything comes in and scares him, it's good just to allow him to be comfortable and have an area where he can hide and feel safe. Some of the benefits you'll find out of having a 6-foot enclosure for an Ackie are, number one, when you're feeding your Ackie and you're releasing any type of, let's say if you live in the UK and you have locusts, or here it would be crickets, grasshoppers, right? And you're releasing these things into the enclosure for the animal to hunt, the animal has more areas to explore and find the food. So since there's a possibility of there being a greater distance between the food item and your monitor lizard, your monitor is going to have to do more running to catch the insects. And of course, if you have a bunch of ground cover like I do, the animal's going to have to do more searching, more digging, and really use that brain and all the different tools this animal's equipped with to find its food. And that's really good for the animal's enrichment because they're getting a chance to use those different things that nature have built into them in order to find their food, and they're going to have to work harder to get it. Another thing I love about having a 6-foot enclosure is it gives plenty of space for the future where in case I want to have multiple Ackies in one enclosure, I can do that. Now, of course, I wouldn't just take a female and throw it in Thunder's enclosure because it's a male, it's already his territory, it's already marked with it. There's different processes you have to do in order to introduce the animals into a space where the male hasn't claimed ownership over it. However, that's a story for a different day. I'm not going to be explaining that on this video. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. There's going to be plenty of footage of Thunder in the future running and hunting and doing all the awesome things that he can do in this 6-foot enclosure. An enclosure of this size should be sufficient for his entire life, but of course, there's always a chance of me doing something bigger in the future. Thunder's going to be in this enclosure for, wow, that's funny. So Thunder's going to be in this enclosure for quite a while. It's nighttime, so my lights are actually going to go off early, so I'm going to get out of here pretty soon. But stay tuned for more videos, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a great day. Peace.